question I call this hearing to order. Welcome to the virtual hearing of the Committee on Foreign Relations, and Happy New Year to all. Let me first acknowledge the presence of Senator Amy Marcos. Sino pa? Senator Tol? There?
Nanglulo ko yung audio.
Senator Tolentino, sir.
Tolentino is also here with us. So I declare the presence of a quorum. This afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking up two international agreements for the concurrence of the Senate. Number one is the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and number two, the Convention on Temporary Admission. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is a legally binding instrument to prohibit nuclear weapons, leading to their total elimination, and was signed by the Philippines on September 20, 2017. The instrument of ratification was sent by the President to the Senate on November 18, 2020, the day he ratified the same. On October 24, during the United Nations Day, Honduras beat us to becoming the 50th country to ratify the treaty called Tpnw, bringing the total number of ratifications to the necessary number or threshold for the treaty's entry into force. In these uncertain times, where different types of weapons are available to annihilate all of us, it is comforting to note that the Tpnw is now a binding instrument that could protect the human race, other living things, and more so our environment. It includes a comprehensive set of prohibitions on participating in any nuclear weapon activities, including remediation assistance. It is also worth mentioning that the Philippines has been a party to the treaty banning nuclear weapon tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater, which was signed on August 5, 1963, and ratified by the Philippines on October 11, 1965, as well as the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, signed in Washington, D.C. on July 1, 1968, and ratified by the Philippines on June 28, 1972. And other conventions on weapons of mass destruction, including bacteriological, biological, toxin, and other chemical weapons. The second international agreement, the Convention on Temporary Admission, or CTA, was signed more than 3 decades ago by the then Customs Cooperation Council, which is now the World Customs Organization in Istanbul, Turkey. The facilitation document that is used under this convention is the Carnet, or ATA Carnet, ATA Carnet, CARNET, which is an international customs and temporary export-import document. It is used to clear customs in 87 countries and territories without paying duties and import taxes on merchandise that will be re-exported within 12 months. Carnets are also known as merchandise passports or passports for goods. So our guests for today in this particular convention will tell us why the Philippines has not been a party to this convention for 30 years now, which obligates parties to grant temporary admission of goods with total conditional relief from import duties and taxes, among other things. We are happy to know that our President has finally acceded to the CTA. The instrument of accession sent for the Senate's concurrence has actually made certain reservations on 12 annexes accompanying the convention, including the rights to impose the value-added tax on the importation of goods under our domestic laws, among other things. So we would like to know this afternoon both the necessity and the economic impact of all these reservations to our country. Today we have with us our resource persons to enlighten the committee on the details of these two agreements before us. So I now call on our committee secretary to recognize all of our invited resource persons. Ms. Su,
Good
please.
afternoon, Your Honors. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Your Honors. Good afternoon po. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have ASEC Igor Bailen, Director Andrea Lecano, Director Shirley Nuevo, Principal Assistant Crystal Gale Dampil, and Attorney Neil Brillantes, all from the Office of Treaties and Legal Affairs. From the Office of United Nations and other international organizations, we have the Executive Director, Mr. Roberto Manalo, Director Nina Kainglet, Director Attorney Christine Margaret Malang, Principal Assistant Tanya Gurano, and Desk Officer Nadine Guevara. And of course, our legislative liaison, we have Deputy LLO Andre Bauzon and Ms. Joarlene Espiritu. From the Department of Justice, we have State Counsel Melvin Suarez. From the Department of Trade and Industry, the Strategic Trade Management Office, we have this afternoon Director Luis Katibayan, Assistant Director Janice de Mayakiak, and Mr. Lawrence Anthony Fernando from the Registration and Authorization Division. From the Department of Science and Technology, we have ASEC Leia Buendia. And from the Regulations and Standards Development section of the DOST, we also have Ms. Teresita de Jesus. From the Nuclear Security and Safeguard section, we have OIC Maria Teresa Salabit. And the DLLO, Director Lita Suerte Felipe. From the Department of National Defense, we have Attorney Raymond Senon Palmera of the Office for Legal and Legislative Affairs. From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have Brigadier General Fernando Felipe of the AFP Munition Control Center. We have Colonel Nasiforo M. Diaz, J5, and we have Captain Angeline Rose Alferez, Office of the Judge Advocate General. From the Philippine National Police, we have Brigadier General Adolfo Samala from Directorate for Intelligence. We have Police Brigadier General Walter Castillejos, Acting Director for Plans. And we have Police Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Capalos from the Explosive and Ordnance Unit. And of course, from the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crimes, we have Ambassador Bruce Concepcion with Attorney Hazel Hoves, Mr. Jean Hesite, and Mr. Ron Timothy Borja. For the second convention, our agenda for today, we have the same people from the Department of Foreign Affairs, plus the Office of International Economic Relations, Special Assistant Joselito Chad Jacinto. And for the Department of Justice, we have State Counsel Paulito de Jesus. From the Department of Trade and Industry, we have ASEC Alan B. Hepti, Ms. Norma Serra Arpafo. And from the Center for International Trade Expositions and Missions, we have Executive Director Pauline Suaco Juan, Mr. Joel Udarbe, and Mr. Jojo Flancia. From the Design Center of the Philippines, we have Executive Director Maria Rita Matute. And the Export Development Council, we have Deputy Executive Director Elsa Valenzuela and Ms. Melanie Huantala. From the Bureau of Customs, we have those who have confirmed in our list are Attorney Edward James D. Buco, Deputy Commissioner. We have Attorney Nicolas Quiamco. We have Collector of Customs from the Port of Clark, Collector Wilnora Kawile. We have from the Planning and Policy Research Division, Attorney Noemi Garcia. From the External Affairs Office, we have Attorney Marieta Zamoranos. From the Export Division, Port of Manila, Attorney Jenny Jokno. And Attorney Karen Anyambao. From the PhilExport, we have Dr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. That's all for now, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Committee Secretary. So we will ask our senators, the committee members, if they want to make some statements. So Senator Marcos, you were raising your hand, please.
Yes, thank you very much to my good chairman, Coco Pimentel, and of course to Senator Francis, who's an expert in this regard. May I, for the purposes of efficiency and less time consumption, already posit certain queries regarding, first of all, the nuclear treaty. And my question, of course, is the question of many, which is why did the negotiation proceed given that there wasn't any participation from a single nuclear power? Russia, US, China, France, and the UK, not a single one participated, and to date, not a single one has signed. So is this a feel-good, good faith effort, or is there going to be real impact on the global order? Of course, I also would like to direct our queries, and perhaps you can show us in your presentations what impact this would have on DOE's apparent interest in developing nuclear power here in the Philippines. Clearly, nuclear weapons are in our constitution, but nuclear power is contained in our recent budget once again with an allocation for exploration in the amount of 90 million. What impact would this have on the interest of Secretary Cusi and those in the energy sector? Thirdly, of course, the issue of the stationing of nuclear weapons in the Philippines. We no longer have US bases, but nevertheless, there have been questions regarding the secret transit of certain nuclear weapons through the Philippine archipelago and our waters. With regard to the temporary admission and the carnets, the ATA carnets, syempre, ang elephant in the room is yung ating history of smuggling. Meron ba tayong safeguards niyan? And do you need our help from the legislature to make certain that this doesn't open us up to all sorts of smuggling? Matagal na natin naririnig sa customs, narito naman ang customs, na yung single window sa customs mai-impose na. And 19 kopong-kopong pa, wala pa naman nangyayari. So I'm very, very curious about how that will finally maybe hasten the customs modernization effort. And then, of course, our questions. The business sector is here. I see Manong Sergio Ortiz Luis. Bakit nag-reservation tayo? Sabi nga ni Chairman, 12 of the annexes we reserve. 13 lang yon. Isa lang yung pinirma natin. Bakit yung 12 hindi natin pinirma? Nakakatuwa. And finally, of course, we have very few existing trade agreements. What effect will this have on the trade agreements that we already have, particularly in Barangay ASEAN? Kasi baka magkaselosan dyan kung sino mauna. Mahiwaga pa naman yung smuggling issues dito sa atin. That would be all, Mr. Chair, and I'd appreciate hearing from our resource persons even at the outset. Thank you po.
Thank you for those guiding questions. The presenters are reminded to focus also or emphasize the points raised by Senator Marcos. Senator Tolentino, would you care, sir, if you want to make a statement? Senator Tol?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just follow the lead of Senator Marcos, the Ilocano way. Ask questions first and find solutions later. So I'll have two questions that probably should ignite the creativity of our foreign affairs personnel here present. These are all experts. And probably one question that should captivate the rest of the group present here. My first question is this. I try to answer this. All of the DFA best minds are here. If the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW, is ratified, and if it enters into force, there is a provision that each party shall submit to the Secretary General of the United Nations not later than 30 days after the treaty enters into force for that state party a declaration. And among the declaration that really caught my attention is this. Take note, DFA. Whether there are nuclear weapons in its territory or in any place under its jurisdiction, or control that are owned, possessed, or controlled by another state. I am now asking you to be creative enough to realize that because of that arbitral ruling, we still have jurisdiction over that areas in the West Philippine Sea being claimed by China. And having said that, it is now apparent that if we approve this treaty, ratified, we can send a note to the United Nations informing the UN Secretary General that we have reasonable grounds to believe that there might be some nuclear armaments there present in the man-made islands made by China. Open naman to. So my question is this, can the DFA find a mode on how to encapsulate the arbitral ruling with whatever positive development we can have on this treaty? I'm setting aside the non-participation as cited by Senator Marcos of the big countries presumably having their own nuclear arsenal, China, US, Russia, among others. But what I'm saying is this, it would strengthen the position of the Philippines because we will now have an oversight on the part of the United Nations to really look into whether they can do that or not, just perhaps some notes to be filed with the UN General Assembly or what have you, to look into the possibility of the presence of nuclear weapons in an area which is supposedly under our control and our jurisdiction, and I'm referring to the West Philippine Sea. Number two, this should be a question likewise that should ignite the imagination not just of the TTI, the Bureau of Customs, for the second treaty, the Convention on the Temporary Admission, CTA, and even our good friend Sergio Ortiz Luis, as to the possibility, Mr. Chairman, of allowing refrigeration, freezing equipment for purposes of storing vaccines on a 6-month period, thereafter renewable for another 6 months, not for re-import, but for a slight use to be part of the cold chain facility of our country as we accept vaccines coming from whatever source. Hindi naman po masama kung yung Moderna ay -80, mapalagay din naman yung ibang bakuna or kung merong ibang freezers na lower capacity for Pfizer or for Sinovac or what have you. Yun lamang po, Mr. Chair, and later on, I am serving notice that I'll be asking questions to the Department of Foreign Affairs relative to our relationship with Taipei. This might be not totally germane to what we are discussing, but it would crisscross the topics, Mr. Chairman. Maraming salamat po.
Senator Tolentino, you want your question about Taipei answered
By the DFA, sir, kasi nandito lahat yung
answered
DFA.
in regular committee hearing, or you want it in a...
This is part of the Convention on Temporary Admission.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the presenters are reminded to keep your presentation short, direct to the point, and answer the concerns of the raised by the members of the committee. So let us now start with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and the order of presentation would be DFA, DOST, PNRI yun, no? And then the DTI, the STMO, the DND, AFP, PNP, and then the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime. So we start first with this one, the TPNW. Is the DFA ready for its presentation on this treaty?
Director Asek Igor Bailen will first take an opening statement, sir.
Okay, Asek Bailen, go ahead.
Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I hope I am heard in this virtual room. Thank you so much. Uh, well, first of all, I extend I convey the best wishes of Secretary Locsin to this committee and to this meeting. The DFA, particularly the Office of Treaties and Legal Affairs, naturally cherishes our long-standing and constitutional relationship with the Senate under Article 7, Section 21 of the treaty process, and upholding the prerogative of the Senate to concur in the ratification of by the President of treaties to which the Philippines is a party. Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee, of my colleagues in DFA are here, as Comsec Sue had said, and good afternoon as well to our colleagues in the interagency. With a view to the questions already propounded by the honorable senators Marcos and Tolentino, I will revise my brief opening statement accordingly and try to answer the type A question, even if I don't think my colleagues from the DFA Office of Asia and Pacific Affairs are here, but I could perhaps give a basic question subject to confirmation by my colleagues in ASPAC. With that, Mr. Chair, I will briefly...
Asek Bailen, can you limit first your statement on the treaty on the prohibition on nuclear weapons?
Yes, Mr.
Doon po
Chairman.
muna, then DFA will present again for the Ata Carne. Okay?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
So the DFA and the rest of the interagency process, of course, support the President's ratification and support the Senate's eventual concurrence in this ratification by the President in the Treaty for the Prohibition on Nuclear Weapons, in accordance with Article 2, Section 8 of the Constitution, which provides the Philippines, consistent with the national interest, adopts and pursues a policy of freedom from nuclear weapons within our territory. It is in the midst of current regional and international tensions involving nuclear weapon states that it is in the interest of the Philippines and of the Filipino people to be a state party to the Tpnw. The Philippines has much to gain from becoming a party to Tpnw, particularly on the provisions on victim assistance and environmental remediation. This assistance would include physical and psychological health care, rehabilitation, and measures to promote socio-economic inclusions. I am not going to repeat the chairman's statement on the information that the Tpnw has actually entered into force with the accession of Honduras as the 50th state party, and Benin, the latest information we have from our mission to the UN in New York, is the 51st state party. Hopefully, the Philippines can become the 52nd, 53rd state party to the Tpnw. The Tpnw will reinforce the commitments against the use, threat of use, development, production, manufacture, acquisition, possession, stockpiling, transfer, stationing, or installation of nuclear weapons. While the treaty itself does not itself eliminate nuclear weapons, as Senator Marcos, of course, referred to the big nuclear weapon states, while the treaty itself does not eliminate nuclear weapons, it can help further delegitimize nuclear weapons and strengthen the legal and political norm against their use. It increases the stigma against nuclear weapons and places great pressure on those states, including the P5, the permanent members of the U.S. Security Council, and other nuclear weapon states, to relinquish those weapons eventually. And as the chairman has said, as part of his statement, the president mentioned in his statement before the UN General Assembly last September that we call on all member states to fully implement the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the Chemical and the Biological Weapons Convention. And the president said that he has asked the Senate to ratify the TPNW, and we were among the first to sign it when it was negotiated and adopted in UN New York in 2017. And finally, Mr. Chair, in ratifying the TPNW, we will join the international community in urging the member states of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, particularly those nuclear weapon states themselves, to pursue effective and concrete measures on disarmament. Therefore, the TPNW will operationalize, implement, and complement some objectives of the NPT in terms of nuclear disarmament and peaceful uses. And this will faithfully comply with the Philippines' constitutional policy of freedom from nuclear weapons, and as a state party to the NPT, as well as the SHANFEZ, or the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapons Free Trade Zone. And the concurrence of the Senate in the President's ratification of the TPNW will be a crucial step in helping secure peace and security, not just for our generation, but reinforce our place in the community of nations to advocate for and promote peace at regional and global levels. With that, Mr. Chair, perhaps with your permission, the other my colleagues in DFA and the interagency would be able to address some of those questions raised by Senator Marcos and Senator Tolentino. But just to address the question of Senator Tolentino with respect to the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, and I speak not only as legal advisor of DFA as ASEC for Treaties and Legal Affairs, but also concurrently as ASEC for Maritime and Ocean Affairs. To briefly answer Senator Tolentino, and perhaps we could go into greater detail later, definitely, even in our negotiations on the Code of Conduct, our guiding principle, of course, is the Philippine Constitution and the 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award. The presence of Chinese artificial islands, whether reclaimed, and the news reports, some of which are verified or unverified, of stockpiling of perhaps nuclear weapons in those reclaimed or artificial islands, that would be, in the first place, it is illegal for China to be occupying those features pertaining to the Philippines, not just under the arbitral award, but under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It would be doubly illegal for China to be, if it were in fact doing so, stockpiling nuclear weapons. And of course, it is not for me to say right now if we have to pursue remedy. That should be the subject perhaps of interagency consultations, perhaps under the aegis of the National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea under the chairmanship of Secretary June Esperon. But certainly that is a legitimate question that we should be considering. And with that preliminary statement and initial reactions, Mr. Chair, I would probably go back if there will be further questions from the honorable senators. Thank you, sir.
Does that complete the DFA's presentation? Yeah, as ASEC.
Sir.
We'll now move on to the... And meron pa?
Yes, sir. That completes the DFA's presentation, but there would
Director
be,
Malang po.
yes, Marge, there would be
Malang.
further
Yes.
questions. Then we could address them with DFA and the other agencies. Thank you, sir.
Sige.
Director March Malang, sir, will do the presentation.
Okay, Director Marge Malang, please.
Nakamute po kayo.
You're on mute, ma'am. Yeah,
Sorry.
okay. You're still on mute, ma'am. And that's it.
Okay, can you hear me, sir?
Good,
Okay.
good.
Okay. Good afternoon, senators. Allow me to share our PowerPoint presentation to facilitate discussions. Can you see the presentation po?
Okay, now it's there.
Yes po. So I will be proceeding directly to the salient provisions of the TPNW, since the status of the treaty has already been discussed, and also the advantages for the Philippines in ratifying this treaty. So first and foremost, we've divided the provisions into two classes. So first is provisions pertaining to obligations of the states parties in general, and the provisions that are specific to the nuclear weapon states. So in Article 1, the very first provision of the TPNW, here is an enumeration of the prohibited activities under the TPNW. So allow me to read the enumeration. It is prohibited under any circumstances to develop, test, produce, manufacture, acquire, possess, or stockpile nuclear weapons and nuclear explosive devices. It is also prohibited to transfer to any recipient nuclear weapons and other nuclear explosive devices. It is also prohibited to receive such transfer of nuclear weapons and nuclear explosive devices. It is prohibited to use or threaten nuclear weapons, to assist, encourage, or induce in any way anyone to engage in the above enumerated prohibited acts. It is also prohibited to seek or receive assistance to engage in any of the prohibited acts. And finally, it is prohibited to allow the stationing or installation or deployment of nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices in the territory or in areas under its jurisdiction. So to point out, these are the prohibited acts. And going to the question propounded by the Honorable Senator Marcos, this does not affect our current nuclear energy program. What is prohibited is the acts enumerated in Article 1, and this does not affect the inalienable right of states to pursue research and development in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So if we're pursuing peaceful uses of nuclear energy, this is not prohibited by the TPNW. Okay. So next is the article on victim assistance and environmental remediation. So this provision provides that state parties with respect to individuals under its jurisdiction shall provide adequate assistance, medical care, or rehabilitation and psychological support to people or individuals affected by the use of nuclear weapons. And state parties with respect to areas under their jurisdiction are to take measures towards environmental remediation of the contaminated areas. Next is the article on international cooperation and assistance. A state party shall have the right to seek and receive assistance from other state parties, and state party in a position to do so shall provide technical, material, and financial assistance to state parties affected by nuclear weapons use. And finally, each state party in a position to do so shall provide assistance to victims of nuclear weapons use. So Article 4 provides the obligations of the nuclear weapon states. So there are three sub-provisions in this article. So nuclear weapon states are mandated to remove nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices from operational status, to ensure the prompt removal of such weapons. Number two, this refers to state parties that have nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices in its territory, but are owned or possessed by another state. So their obligation is to promptly remove such weapons from their territory. And then finally, both parties, nuclear weapon states and those with nuclear weapons in their territory, shall submit a report to the meeting of state parties and review conference of the TPNW. Okay, so going to the positions of the P5, the possessor states or the nuclear weapon states, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty recognized 5 nuclear weapon states. So these are China, France, Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So China abstained from the voting on the UN General Assembly resolution that established the mandate for nations to negotiate the TPNW. And eventually it did not participate in the negotiations. Okay, and then looking at its current compliance with the NPT or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it has not yet eliminated its nuclear weapons in its territory. Okay, so France, Russia, UK, and the US also voted against. So China abstained, and the 4 others voted against the UN General Assembly resolution establishing the mandate for nations to negotiate the TPNW. And during the negotiations, it did not participate. And naturally, it hasn't signed or ratified the treaty as it has not yet complied with its disarmament obligations under the NPT. So to address the question of the Honorable Senator Marcos, there was a UN General Assembly conference in 2016 that discussed the decision to begin negotiations on banning nuclear weapons. And such a conference was adopted by an overwhelming majority of the UN member states. So even with the abstention and the objection of China and the 4 other nuclear weapon states, the negotiation continued. And eventually, the final text of the TPNW was adopted. Okay. So, additionally, in 2018, this P5, in a joint statement, stated that we firmly believe that the best way to achieve a world without nuclear weapons is through a gradual process that takes into account the international security environment. And according to the P5, TPNW ignores the international security context and regional challenges and does not increase the trust and transparency between states. So in the ASEAN, 5 have signed the TPNW. So these are Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, and the Philippines. And Laos, PDR, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam have ratified the treaty. So we can see that these are only 9 member states of the ASEAN. Singapore.
Mr. Chair, yeah, if I may, what was the basis for the abstention of the Singaporeans?
Yes, ma'am. Singapore actively participated in the negotiations of the TPNW. However, as posted in their official website, their official position is that we regret that our concerns were not fully taken into account during the negotiations and during the adoption of the treaty. We reiterate our view that the TPNW should not in any way affect the rights and obligations of state parties under other international treaties and agreements. Furthermore, Singapore is also of the position that to achieve meaningful progress in nuclear disarmament, all the relevant parties need to be involved in a collective global effort. So until now, there is no indication that Singapore will sign or ratify the TPNW. All right. Just to before we end, just to emphasize that the cornerstone of the disarmament regime, the Non-Proliferation Treaty or the NPT, in effect, created two classes of state parties. Okay, there is, in the one hand, the non-nuclear weapon states, and on the other hand, the nuclear weapon states. So the NPT is clear in prohibiting non-nuclear weapon states from developing or acquiring nuclear weapons. In a way, it can be said that NPT reflected the sentiment before then that there is a need to prioritize non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And as we can see, it is a successful, the NPT is successful in that regard. However, 50 years after the NPT's entry into force, there are still nuclear weapon states. So this is where the TPNW comes in. It represents the view that progress on disarmament, meaning the complete, verifiable, and irreversible elimination of nuclear weapons by the P5 is long overdue, and there is now a need to delegitimize their continued possession of nuclear weapons. So to conclude, just to reiterate the points presented by the Honorable Assistant Secretary Bailen, in ratifying the TPNW, the Philippines joins the international community in urging member states of the NPT to pursue effective and concrete measures on disarmament. Although not binding on the P5 or the possessor states, if they do not ratify or sign the treaty, TPNW continues to contribute to the development of customary international law on the issue, and it strengthens the legal and political norms against the use of nuclear weapons. It increases the stigma against nuclear weapons use and places greater pressure on the nuclear weapon states to relinquish nuclear weapons. So with that, thank you.
Director,
Yes, po.
just to be clear, the nuclear weapon states are not limited to the 5, no? Meron pa, di ba? More than 5 yan.
Yes, sir, the 5 nuclear weapon states are those that who proliferated nuclear weapons prior to the NPT or prior to 1968, but we also have 4 other states reportedly developing their own nuclear weapons program. So these are Israel, India, Pakistan, and the DPRK.
Okay, but if okay, kaya sabi mo there are now two categories of states, no? So and the NW and then the non-NW states. So if I were to ask you, how many are the members of the NW states category from your point of view? 5 or 9?
Sir, under the NPT, it's 5, sir. But we have 4 other states reportedly developing their nuclear weapons program.
Okay, sige. Okay, we will leave it at that, okay? So, thank you for that presentation. Who's next, Tom Sexu? Can we now go to the DOST or may DFA pa? Is that the DFA na?
That's the DFA, sir.
Okay.
We can move to the DOST and the other
Let's
departments.
now hear from the DOST, the PNRI, Philippine Nuclear Research Institute, if they have a presentation. Who is the
Thank you, Honorable Pimentel. We would like to support the ratification of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons signed by former Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano on 20th of September 2017. Actually, the treaty proposes a comprehensive set of prohibitions on participating in any nuclear weapon activities. The Department of Science and Technology, Philippine Nuclear Research Institute, formerly the Philippine Atomic Energy Commission, created in 1958, with a dual mandate, namely to promote the peaceful applications of nuclear energy and to regulate the safe utilization of nuclear energy. As the government agency mandated to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, the DOST-PNRI is committed to share its responsibility in the prevention and the promotion of nuclear energy and prevention or suppression to any activity or undertakings to develop, test, produce, acquire, possess, stockpile, or use or threaten to use nuclear weapons on its national territory. The DOST-PNRI is also committed to preserve its role in fulfilling the Philippines' obligations to the following treaties as well. The Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapons Free Zone Treaty. The DOST also recognizes that the treaties mentioned above provide not only the cornerstones of nuclear disarmament and a non-proliferation regime, but also present a verification system that plays a vital role in promoting international peace and security for the total elimination of nuclear weapons as stated in the said treaty. In Article 5 of the National Implementation of the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, it has been stated that once the Philippines becomes a party to the treaty, it takes all appropriate legal, administrative, and other measures, including imposition of penal sanctions to a certain degree, which also stipulate in the amendment on the Convention of Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials, to which the Philippines is also a signatory. In November 2020, the Philippines participated in the ASEAN Regional Forum on the Nuclear Risk Reduction and Disarmament Workshop, and the DOST also supported this forum in its role in promoting peace and stability in the region, with trust and confidence that nuclear risk reduction contributes to and are essential for disarmament, serving both national and collective security interests. The DOST-PNRI also reiterates its commitment to its role as one of the agencies in the implementation of Republic Act 10697, also known as the Strategic Trade Management Act, which declares the state to be free from weapons of mass destruction in its territory, which is also consistent with the national interest to fulfill its international commitments and obligations in the UN Security Council Resolution 1540 to take and enforce effective measures to establish domestic controls to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and their means of delivery, and to maintain international peace and security, and promote economic growth by facilitating trade and investment through the responsible management of strategic goods and the provision of related services. So in addition, the DOST-PNRI has also published in its 2018 administrative order authorizing transfers of equipment, materials, etc., related to technology identified in the annex, except for use in nuclear explosive activity and non-nuclear weapon state, also unsafeguarded nuclear fuel cycle activity, and in general, when there is unacceptable risk of diversion to such an activity, and when there are transfers contrary to the objective of averting proliferation of nuclear weapons, and when there is an unacceptable risk of diversion to act. So therefore, DOST reiterates its full support for the ratification of the Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and believes that this move will be a positive contribution of the Philippines to further strengthen the goals of global nuclear disarmament towards a total elimination of nuclear weapons. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, ASEC Leia Buendia. Thank you. Can we now proceed to the DTI, the Strategic Trade Management Office, if present?
Yes, sir. We have Director Luis Katibayan, Attorney Janice de Mayakyak, and Mr. Lawrence Fernando.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Luis Katibayan from the Strategic Trade Management Office.
Go ahead, Director. Go ahead.
Okay, sir. Honorable Senators and distinguished guests in this meeting, I am Luis Katibayan from STMO. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide our views on the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the TPNW. The comments we will provide come from the perspective of the Strategic Trade Management Office of DTI. The TPNW recognizes that the existence of nuclear weapons has catastrophic consequences for humanity. In conjunction with the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and already existing multilateral agreements, the TPNW seeks to prohibit, among others, the use, development, testing, production, manufacturing, acquisition, possession, or stockpiling of nuclear weapons. The TPNW also establishes comprehensive measures for the elimination of such weapons. Further, the TPNW requires state parties to adopt domestic legislation that will implement the treaty's provisions. The speaker earlier, our colleague from the DOST, ASEC Buendia, referred to the Strategic Trade Management Act. And we would like to add that Section 2 of Republic Act 10697, or the STMA, declares that it is a policy of the state to be free from weapons of mass destruction in its territory, which is consistent with the constitutional provision that adopts and pursues a policy of freedom from nuclear weapons in our territory. Section 2 of the said law further provides that the enactment of the STMA is consistent with the national interest and in fulfillment of our international commitments and obligations. These obligations include those provided under United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540, which require UN member states to take and enforce effective measures to establish domestic controls to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and their means of delivery, maintain international peace and security, promote economic growth by facilitating trade and investment through the responsible management of strategic goods and the provision of related services. The STMA provides the framework for the management of strategic goods and the provision of related services in accordance with international standards. The STMA defines strategic goods as products that, for security reasons or due to international agreements, are considered to be of such military importance that their export is either prohibited altogether or subject to specific conditions. Such goods are generally suitable for military purposes or for the production of weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear and radiological explosive devices and their major subsystems. The enactment of the STMA is aligned with Article 5 of the TPNW, which requires state parties to adopt necessary measures to implement obligations and take appropriate legal, administrative, and other measures to prevent and suppress any prohibited activity undertaken by persons within their territory. The establishment of management systems for the cross-border trade of strategic goods, including nuclear-related items and technologies, supports the main objective of the treaty to prohibit the use, development, testing, production, manufacturing, acquisition, possession, or stockpiling of nuclear weapons. The STMA, therefore, is a significant piece of legislation that is consistent with and directly supports the domestic implementation of the TPNW. We are therefore in support of the Senate's concurrence with the TPNW. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. That's Director Luis Katibayan.
Katibayan, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So, can we now proceed to the DND? DND, yes. If DND and the AFP.
Yes, sir. We have Attorney Raymond Senon Palmera of the DND.
Whoever is ready, yes, DND, please. Attorney Senon.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. Good afternoon, Chairman. Attorney Raymond Palmera from the DND Legal and Legislative Affairs. Thank you for having us. I would just like to make the short manifestation of the department's position that the Department of National Defense fully supports the Treaty on the Prohibition of the Nuclear Weapons and supports for the concurrence of the Senate to it. Chemical and biological weapons have already been delegitimized by the international law. The adoption of the treaty is a significant step in the right direction, considering that nuclear weapons are considered to be the most dangerous weapons on Earth. To highlight its disastrous effects, one attack could end up millions, considering the population density increase, and with its disastrous effects extending to the lives of future generations. It's reported that the dangers from such weapons arise from their very existence. Now, this disarmament is the best protection against such dangers. Hence, efforts aimed at its total elimination can be considered as a disarmament to save humanity itself. It is also our position that the treaty is in full accord with the constitutional provision on a nuclear weapons-free policy. This will, in effect, pave the way for the implementation of this constitutional policy. That is all, Your Honors.
Thank you, Attorney Palmera.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for pointing out that chemical weapons are already banned or prohibited,
Yes.
biological weapons, and yet nuclear weapons are not yet prohibited.
Yes, sir.
Is the AFP going to make a presentation?
Yes, sir. We have Brigadier General
My
Felipe.
my classmate, the Chief of Staff, is not going to make the presentation.
Good afternoon, sir. I will be representing the Chief of Staff.
Brigadier General Felipe?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honorable senators, and other attendees or fellow attendees. The AFP manifests that we have no nuclear weapons program. Nevertheless, we continuously support several disarmament treaties and conventions related to nuclear weapons. The AFP supports the total elimination of nuclear weapons and the ratification of the treaty with the intent to continually submit reports on the AFP's compliance towards the implementation of the treaty. The devastating effects of nuclear weapons present grave implications on human survival and security, both to human life and property. To prevent such harmful effects, the treaty encourages states to facilitate safeguards on peaceful nuclear activities and prevent wider dissemination of nuclear weapons. Further, it urges to promote the establishment and maintenance of international peace and security, help to ease international tension, and strengthen the trust between states, and contribute to the further development of the applications of atomic energy for peaceful purposes. That's all for us in the AFP, sir. Good afternoon.
Brigadier General, out of curiosity lang, when you were still in military school, did you discuss nuclear weapons? Were you shown videos of the devastation caused by nuclear weapons? Kasama ba 'yon sa?
Yes, sir.
So, grabe
Kasama
ba?
po yun, sir.
Anong naalala mo, sir? Grabe ba ang mga footages, pictures or videos?
Yes, sir. Nakita naman natin yung implication ng mga damages sa Hiroshima at saka sa Japan during World War II. So, yun ang reason kaya we support the ratification of the Tpnw para sa ganun ma-minimize natin yung damages to human lives and properties.
I'm sure pinag-aralan nyo ito. Okay, thank you for the presentation, sir, General. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Next is the PNP, if they have a presentation.
Yes, sir. The one to present, sir, will be Brigadier General Walter Castillejos. And we also acknowledge Captain Maria Glaiza Roncal, who's also with us today.
So it's Police Brigadier General Castillejos who will now make the presentation. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, sir. General, nakamute ka.
Thank you, sir. To the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, Senator Aquilino Pimentel III, sir, and to all the honorable senators present, and of course the invited guests in virtual attendance. Magandang hapon po. For and on behalf of the 221 strong PNP, I wish to thank this august body for inviting the Philippine National Police to the public hearing on this historic and legally binding instrument to prohibit nuclear weapons, leading towards their total elimination. Indeed, the catastrophic humanitarian consequences on the use of nuclear weapons is vivid in the minds of those who have experienced it, as well as those who employ it in the grand theater of war. These cataclysmic events have no place in human history, be it now or in the future. No less than the 1987 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines mandates that the Philippines, consistent with national interest, adopts and pursues a policy of freedom from nuclear weapons in its territory. It is along this line that the Philippines signed the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons on September 20, 2017. The Philippine National Police is in unison with the declaration of our beloved President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, that there is no excuse for deaths that a nuclear war could cause, that the reckless use of chemical and biological weapons that can cause mass destruction. These weapons of death puts us all at mortal risk, especially if they fall in the hands of terrorists without a thread of humanity in their souls. Relatedly, the Philippines signed the International Convention on the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism, the ICCANT, on September 15, 2005, and the Philippine National Police signified its concurrence for the ratification, and we submitted the same to the Department of Foreign Affairs on March 26, 2020. In line with the concurrence of the PNP with the International Convention on the Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism, the PNP, as the premier law enforcement agency in the country, once again extends its full and unwavering support to the ratification of this treaty. Thank you very much, Your Honors, and God bless us all.
Thank you, Police Brigadier General Castillejos. So that completes the PNP's presentation, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so can we now go to this?
That's all, sir.
Okay, can we now go to the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime, Ambassador Bruce Concepcion, if he has a position paper or presentation?
Senator Coco Pimentel.
Go ahead, sir.
Senator Amy Marcos, Senator Francis Escudero, distinguished
Tolentino,
representatives.
sir. Senator Tolentino, sir. Francis Tolentino.
Senator Francis Tolentino. Sorry. Distinguished representatives, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We thank the office of Senator Coco Pimentel for this opportunity to have submitted our position paper and to share in this discussion the issues on the TPNW. It is the position of this office, the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime, that the Philippines ratify the TPNW. However, there are issues that surround the TPNW, among others. The mention of the TPNW acknowledging the ethical imperatives for nuclear disarmament and the urgency of achieving and maintaining a nuclear weapon-free world is not only laudable, but highly ambitious, if at all next to impossible. And with 5 nuclear weapon states, or the 9 nuclear-armed states, or nuclear-armed bearing states, total disarmament is simply a long-shot vision with the concept of deterrence in their minds. Nevertheless, TPNW has to take up the debate and has to find a credible substitute for the concept of deterrence derived from the threat of nuclear or display of the threat of nuclear catastrophe. Also, as a low-volume, high-value, dual-use commodity, diversion of nuclear material is not just profitable, but a sensitive endeavor. In all respects, despite the sensitiveness of the issue, TPNW prescribed no way out for the nuclear states so that if they wish to dispose of their massive nuclear arsenal, thus nuclear waste, guidelines and standards need to be outlined, putting in place safety and security issues, something that the TPNW have handed over to the IAEA to decide, considering IAEA being undermanned and its protocols outdated. IAEA itself promotes the use of nuclear energy, as the large slogan printed on its headquarters walls in Vienna says, "Atoms for peace." And this tells greatly to each visitor what's the intention of it. The Article 4, Paragraph 6 prescribes that states parties shall designate a competent international authority, but it is only intended to negotiate and verify the irreversible elimination of nuclear weapons programs and the conversion of all nuclear weapons-related facilities. On declarations, the provision on the mandatory declarations of the TPNW are easier said than done. What if the state party refuses to declare, or in the worst case, falsifies its declaration by reason of national security? This is an issue also with the Arms Trade Treaty and is not a remote possibility to TPNW. On victim assistance and environmental remediation, each state is obliged to adequately provide age and gender-sensitive assistance without discrimination, by the use of affected by the use or testing of nuclear weapons. The caveat of under its jurisdiction effectively limits the liability of the said state party, while it should have been that regardless of jurisdiction, the cause of the injury, death, casualty, damage to the environment shall be the responsibility of the state who caused it, whether intentional or accidental. This is not a good idea for non-nuclear states like the Philippines to be paying for damages of nuclear testing done by other states in its jurisdiction. It's a remote possibility, but a possibility as well. On testing, Article 1A of TPNW prohibits the testing, among others, or at least possess nuclear weapons, or in Article 1C, assist, among others, in any way from anyone to engage in any activity prohibited to a state party under the treaty. Yet in Article 6 and 7, there are several mentions of testing which, if done by a state party, is prohibited, but which appears in the language of the treaty to be tolerated. Conclusion. The use of nuclear weapons is not just a story of weapons, but also the peaceful use of weapons and atoms. Any move against the proliferation of nuclear use will also deter the use of atoms for peaceful use sooner or later. TPNW is supposed to be an improvement of the NPT, just like other treaties. There is so much expectation on TPNW towards total nuclear disarmament and of preventing a nuclear catastrophe. The TPNW is far from perfect, however. For one, it has no verification regime, which is a very important activity in disarmament. if there be any. Yet there are a few things that can be improved on. Though this is a thing better said than done, with a few yet very powerful states on one side of the balance and the numerous yet powerless parties on the other. And this is a far cry from getting to be a numbers game and an appeal in the lines of saving humanity, as a strategy still needs to be crafted in order for the greater majority to turn this powerful minority into surrendering their dominance based on nuclear power. Else, the rationale of deterrence, which have been proven effective in the Cold War, will always be incumbent. Finally, the Philippines, despite being part of the non-nuclear majority, still has to move an inch toward a nuclear future, at least in peaceful ways, substituting the regularly polluting coal and oil plants with a cleaner one. The nation had that chance when the Philippines secured a hefty loan from the Bataan nuclear power plant, but somehow the constitutional provision has misinterpreted not just to apply to nuclear weapons, but for all things nuclear as well. For all this, the Philippines cannot be imagined being on the other side of the balance, however, as it is not even a nuclear state at all. So for all this, sadly, the Philippines has to ratify, having been left with no better option. In the first place, way back in September 2020, during his speech in the 75th General Assembly, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte announced that he had asked the Philippine Senate to ratify the Tpnw, emphasizing that the Philippines is among those who signed it first. Thank you so much, fellow workers in the government.
Thank you, Ambassador Concepcion. Okay, so I think all the agencies have presented. So let's now open the floor for discussion. If the members of the committee have questions, if maybe some of your guiding questions stated earlier were not answered. Senator Marcos, Senator Tolentino, meron ba?
Yes.
Senator Tolentino, yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tama po kayo. A lot of questions were not, a lot of the related questions to my primordial questions were not answered. Apparently, this was done not in conjunction with the arbitral ruling or even prior to the discussions relative to the West Philippine Sea issues. My only concern here, Mr. Chairman, while I am for it, is that this treaty is more of a treaty that will not be enforced. Cannot be enforced because of the non-participation of the 5 countries involved. So it would, with due respect, it should not be termed as not non-proliferation, but it will be a treaty that will be a treaty of non-compliance, non-enforcement, and we will be relegated to discussing this as a non-problem. Paano naman po natin may enforce yung Article 4 or even point number 7? How do we inspect the artificial islands there, which is part of our jurisdiction, which is part of our territory? If there are nuclear weapons stockpiled there, who will grant us the permit? Who will accompany us to visit those artificial islands? Will we be allowed, even if we comply with the provisions of the treaty after 30 days, wherein we are supposed to report that to the Secretary General of the United Nations? How can we support our report with adequate proof? And how can we miss without being sanctioned if we fail likewise to report? So this is a diplomatic quandary on the part of the Philippines, because we have no capacity to enforce. We can report, But who will enforce? If we don't report, we will be violating the treaty because the parties should undertake not to, and I'm quoting this, allow the installation, deployment of nuclear weapons in its territory, under its jurisdiction. At jurisdiction natin yung West Philippine Sea. So, it is really very sad to note that we will be agreeing to a treaty, but it will be pregnant with non-compliance in the days ahead. We cannot prevent China from stockpiling. We cannot ask China to remove the stockpiles. We cannot ask the international community to accompany us to verify the existence, to prevent the stockpiling, to remove the stockpiled materials, and to sanction a non-party to the treaty. And I'm referring to the occupant of the West Philippine Sea. So, yun po yung dilemma natin, Mr. President, and a lot of unanswered questions. So, while we are in agreement with the 50 other states, the situation of the 50 other states would be completely different from us. Aside perhaps from, I think Indonesia was mentioned as one of those who concurred. So, if I ask the Department of Foreign Affairs, after the Senate ratifies this, what is the next step? Pursuant to the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, we submit the treaty to the Secretariat. Are we still allowed to have reservations? Are we still allowed to have some comments consistent with what, modesty aside, I previously mentioned? Are we still allowed to seek the international community? Mention was made of UN Security Resolution 1540 a while ago. And just one veto of a member. All the 5 countries mentioned are members of the Security Council. So what's the next step, Mr. President? Can we ask the FA after we ratify this? We submit this to the Secretariat, presumably based in Vienna or whatever place, and are we still allowed to make some reservations or amendments? I seek that answer, Mr. Chair.
Anyone from the DFA to react to the points raised by Senator Tolentino?
Yes, sir.
Marge, okay.
Yes po. With regard to the question of the Honorable Senator on what are the next steps after the Senate concurrence, the instrument of ratification will be deposited to the depositary, the UN Secretary General in the UN headquarters in New York. And the other question is okay, about the reservation. According to the text of the treaty, reservations are not allowed. So we cannot propound our reservations to the treaty. So.
Ambassador Concepcion, were you raising your hand? Do you want to react, sir?
I was just confirming that there's no reservation allowed, sir, anymore.
No reservation allowed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Senator Tolentino.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, if no reservations would be allowed, it is as if we accept the conditions of the treaty, imposing additional obligations on us as a state party. 1, we have to report to the UN Secretary General. 2, we have to ensure that we will not allow the stationing or deployment of any nuclear weapons within the West Philippine Sea. And how can we do that? We cannot even approach those man-made islands. How can we inspect? How can we ensure? So even before the ratification, we are already about to commit a violation, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. So may I ask our friends from the DFA, what would be the penalty for this if we, because the 50 other member states would probably comment that mention was made of the word stigma, that you are not implementing the treaty, or not complying, because you are allowing the installation of nuclear weapons, if true, within your territory. So this diplomatic quandary is really hard to resolve. So we implement, we ratify, even before we ratify, we are about to violate. So what would be the penalty, Mr. Chairman?
This is more of a theoretical question, no, Senator Tolente. You are not stating that it's a fact that there are nuclear weapons there, right?
But mention, Mr. Chairman, mention was made of I forgot the resource person a while ago who more or less made an affirmation of what I've said. So even if it's hypothetical, speculative, and theoretical, the only way to prevent that violation from becoming a violation is to have an inspection. But how can we do that? So is there a penalty that would be imposed upon the Philippines, just in case we indeed commit said violations from the DFA?
DFA,
Thank you, Mr.
please.
Chairman.
Yes. Can DFA react? Director Malang ba or Bailen? ASEC Bailen? Yes, Director Malang.
Okay. Yes, sir. With regard first to the question of the Honorable Senator about the declaration. Okay, so what is required of us from the treaty or the Tpnw is that we declare whether there are any nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices in our territory. So we are only mandated to declare whether we have nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices if we are we have knowledge of this. So if we are we have knowledge or we are allowing other nuclear weapon states to install or to station or to deploy nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices in our territory. However, if we are
But Mr. Chair, may I confirm from the good lady if she considers the West Philippine Sea Islands as part of Philippine territory?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is confirmed by the arbitral award of the international of the ICJ, sir.
So because of our lack of knowledge, we cannot even comply with this provision in Article 4 that there are no nuclear weapons within our territory or places under our jurisdiction or control, because we have no knowledge. So that's what we're going to declare. We have no knowledge because we have no possession of the reefs and the banks and the artificial islands made. Ganun po ba?
Sir, we have no knowledge of the presence of nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices in our territory, including those territories subject of the arbitral award, sir.
So hindi kaya parang mahina yon, nasa territory natin, di natin alam kung may presence o wala. But ang reasoning natin is we have no possession. But again, to spin this in a nicer way, can't the DFA find of a diplomatic language that would more or less affirm our ownership based on that arbitral ruling, while we confirm lack of knowledge? There has to be a diplomatic language to do that. Dalawang ibon na yung tinamaan natin dito. We comply with the treaty, and then we again strengthen our position and ownership. Yun lang po yung sinabi ko rin kanina, Mr. Chair. Salamat po. Ayoko pahabain ito, pero sana ganun din po yung mindset ng ating DFA, na kahit ina-admit natin na mahina yung ating posisyon, kaya pa rin natin palakasin. Alang-alang po sa territory ng Pilipinas. Salamat po, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tolentino. I've read the position paper of Ambassador Concepcion. He traces the history of the treaty. The negotiations started mga more than 5 years ago, no? Even before the arbitral ruling. Tama po ba yan, Ambassador? from your position paper, meron kang parang history.
Yes po, yes po.
So ganito.
Tpnw.
So our negotiators did not have at that time yet the benefit of the arbitral ruling. And then tayo naman sa Senate, we cannot amend the terms of the treaty. Tama po ba yun, Senator Tolentino, as being the expert in international law? We are here to ratify to concur in the ratification. We cannot amend or change any word, even a punctuation mark in the treaty. Tama po ba yun?
I would have looked for ways to have us place a reservation, but apparently the treaty does not allow reservations.
And then the negotiations, sir, were way before the ruling. So, okay, so any other questions? Senator Marcos is not online anymore. So, if there are no questions, the chair moves, if there is no objection from the members, especially Senator Tolentino, that we now endorse this treaty, this particular treaty, to the plenary for the concurrence of the Senate to the ratification by the President. Any objections, sir? No? Okay, hearing none. So carried. So we now move on to the next item in our agenda, and those who have finished their business with the committee will be excused now. You can leave our hearing, sir, and the chair thanks you for your participation. Thank you very much to all.
Mr. Chair,
yes, Senator
can we have one DFA personnel knowledgeable in Asia Pacific matters, specifically Taiwan, for my last question relative to the Convention on Temporary Admission? Just one
yes,
from
yes,
DFA.
yes, they will stay. The DFA the DFA will stay. All those who have finished their business with the committee are now allowed to take their leave, and then with the thanks of the chairman and the committee, thank you for participating in our hearing. Thank you for your contribution. So now we move on. Okay, so we move on to the.
Thank you so much, honorable senators. Ambassador Concepcion signing out. Signing out.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, everybody. The generals, thank you. So let's now discuss the Convention on Temporary Admission. The first presenter would be the Department of Foreign Affairs. Who will be the one who will make the presentation? Comsec,
Sir, wala na si ASEC Bailen. But the one to present, sir, will be Collector Wilnora Kawile of the Port of Clark from the Bureau of Customs.
Sige, but
maybe we can proceed.
In the meantime that the DOF through the BOC is making the presentation, can you call DFA to log in again, because Senator Tolentino requests their presence? May question siya.
Yes, sir. We'll do that po.
Okay, so who will now make the presentation for the Department of Finance again? Sino to?
Collector Wilnora Kawile.
Collector Kawile is recognized. Saan si Ma? Yes, Bureau of Customs.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, honorable senators, our fellow public servants, and other attendees. I will be presenting in behalf of Attorney Dodoria, who will give the presentation at the first hearing during the first meeting. The Bureau of Customs has prepared a 24-page paper.
For example, exactly, APEC. Taiwan is a member. China is a member. Diba?
Asek, Bailen, you're okay, you're being heard. Okay, nakamute na siya. Customs, can you restart, please? I think we also have a problem, Comsec, we have a problem with the connection of the Bureau of Customs.
Yes, sir. Nasa conference room po kasi sila eh. Naka-conference sila, sir. So, mahina yung audio nila.
Can we solve this problem? Hello. Customs, can you hear us?
Can you hear us now, sir?
Okay, go ahead, continue.
Malayo po. Can you go nearer the microphone?
Siguro, sir, lakasan ko lang yung boses. Good afternoon, honorable senators, our fellow public servants, and other attendees. The Bureau of Customs has prepared a 34-page paper relative to the accession to the 1990 Istanbul Convention on Temporary Admission. The presentation includes the concept, definition, benefits, the salient features of temporary admission, some provisions of the CMTA in relation to the temporary admission, and the proposed reservation. We refer temporary admission as conditionally taxed and or duty exempt importation under Section 800 of the CMTA. Under this section, certain goods above 27 are exempt from the payment of import duties upon compliance with the formalities prescribed in the regulations. But prior to the enactment of the CMTA, we had the TCCP, and the conditionally taxed and or duty exempt importation was under Section 105. And under the Philippine Tariff Act of 1909, during the American occupation, this was generally labeled as free subject to express conditions. We defined temporary admission under the revised Kyoto Convention as the customs procedure under which certain goods can be brought into a customs territory conditionally relieved totally or partially from payment of import duties and taxes. Such goods must be imported for a specific purpose and must be intended for exportation within a specified period and without having undergone any change, except normal depreciation due to the use made of them. There are 4 regulations issued in relation to conditionally taxed and or duty-free importations under the CMTA. In 2020, CAO 6-2020 on conditionally taxed and or duty-exempt importations under Section 800 of the CMTA, but excluding subsections F and G was issued. And in 2019, there is CAO number 8-2019 to cover the admission, movement, and exportation of containers at the seaports. In 2018, we have CAO 1-2018 specifically for subsection G of Section 800 of the CMTA, known as the Amended Rules on Consolidated Shipment of Balikbayan Boxes. While in 2016, CAO 6-2016 was issued to implement subsection F of Section 800 of the CMTA on conditionally taxed and or duty-exempt importation of returning residents and overseas Filipino workers. In all cases, importations are required to file goods declaration, commonly known as import entry, and must post a security equivalent to the duties and taxes to secure the payment of duties and taxes if the conditions are violated. These documents must also be submitted the tax endorsement, the tax exemption endorsement or TDI from the Department of Finance, Number 2 is permit or clearance from regulatory agencies if these are required, such as if goods are classified as regulated under Section 117 of the CMPA. The bill of lading, the sales invoice, and packing list. And there are also 6 basic requirements in securing tax exemption from the DOF. One is completely filled out DOF Revenue Office Form number 91, notarized affidavit of end use or ownership, signed and dated bill of lading or airway bill, the commercial invoice, the certificate of venue and date, authorization from exhibitor if consigned to broker or forwarder. And what are the 2 main objectives of the Istanbul Convention? These are the simplification and harmonization of customs procedures through the adoption of a single international instrument involving goods allowed temporary admission or the use of a temporary admission paper, which is commonly known as Ata Carnet. And number 2 objective is, since the Ata Carnet serves as security, this will dispense with securing a regular bond or any other form of security to guarantee the payment of duties and taxes through the accreditation of a National Issuing and Guaranteeing Association, or we call it NIGA. A guaranteeing association is required under Chapter 4, Article 8 of the Istanbul Convention. So what is Ata Carnet? Ata Carnet or Carnet is an international customs and temporary export-import document. It is used to clear temporarily admitted goods in customs upon importation without paying duties and taxes. Carnets are also known as merchandise passports or passports for goods. In this slide, we will briefly present the difference of Ata Convention and Istanbul Convention. Ata Convention refers to the Customs Convention on the Ata Carnet for the temporary admission of goods, which was adopted in 1961, while Istanbul Convention refers to the Convention on Temporary Admission, which was adopted in Istanbul, Turkey on June 26, 1990. From the adoption of the Ata Convention, about 6 international conventions were drawn up, allowing specific categories of goods to be temporarily admitted or imported. Other international organizations also adopted conventions in the field of temporary importation, and as a result, some 15 international instruments existed in the 1980s, each governing the temporary admission of a restricted category of goods. Ata Convention specifically covers goods temporarily imported under the Customs Convention on the temporary importation of professional equipment, and the Customs Convention concerning facilities for the importation of goods for display or use at exhibitors, fairs, meetings, or similar events, insofar as it is a contracting party to the conventions. And there's no provision on CPD Carnet on Ata Convention, unlike in the Istanbul Convention. CPD Carnet means the temporary admission papers used for the temporary admission of means of transport. These are the goods covered under the Istanbul Convention. Goods for display or use at exhibitions, fairs, meetings, or similar events. Professional equipment, containers, pallets, packaging, samples, and other goods imported in connection with the commercial operation. Goods imported in connection with the manufacturing operation. Goods imported for educational, scientific, or cultural purposes. Travelers' personal effects and goods imported for sports purposes. Tourist publicity material, goods imported as frontier traffic, goods imported for humanitarian purposes, means of transport covered by the CPD Carnet, animals, and goods imported with partial relief from import duties and taxes. For the next few slides, we will show the counterpart or similar provisions under the CMTA and the Istanbul Convention. The first column is for Istanbul Convention on temporary admission, while the second column is the CMTA counterpart or similar provisions. For Annex B1 under the Istanbul Convention, goods for display or use at exhibitions, fairs, meetings, or similar events. This is subsection J of section 800 and subsection R under the same section. For the form of security that we require 100% of the certain duties, taxes, and other charges for section J. But for commercial samples, we categorize this into commercial and non-commercial. If the FCA value is less than 50,000 pesos, a security and an amount equivalent to the certain duties, taxes, and other charges thereon. But if the FCA value is more than 50,000, the importer has the option either to post a bond for the 50,000 less, or pay the duties and taxes for the above 50,000. For the documents required upon importation under CAV 6/2020, the tax exemption identification from BOF, the 100% surety for duties and taxes, the goods declaration or import entry, the BL or airway bill invoice, the same with section 800R for samples. For Annex B, professional equipment, this is section 800, subsection I, and subsection K for goods brought in by foreign film producers. We also require 100% of the certain duties, taxes, and other charges as security for both subsection I and K. And we also require these documents, the DEI from BOF, goods declaration, permit or clearance from regulatory agencies, BL or airway bill invoice. But for importations by foreign film producers, aside from the four, we also require an affidavit of foreign film producers and the certificate of identification upon entry to the Philippines. And also for photographic, cinematographic films, we have also required the re-identification upon entry to the Philippines and affidavit by the importer. For Annex B3 of the Istanbul Convention on the containers, pallets, packaging, samples, and other goods imported in connection with commercial operation, we have subsection 10 of section 800. Also, we require security equivalent to 100% of the certain duties and taxes, and TEI from BOF, goods declaration, the BL or airway bill, and the invoice of packages. For Annex B, goods imported in connection with the manufacturing operation, we cannot find similar or counterpart provisions in the CMTA under sections 800. For Annex B5, goods imported for educational, scientific, or cultural purposes, we have section J, but only for technical and scientific films imported by technical, cultural, and scientific institutions, and subsection S, but only for animals and plants for scientific, experimental propagation or breeding, and for other botanical, zoological, and national defense purpose, and on subsection T on books and publications. For subsection J, we require 100% of the certain duties, taxes, and other charges as a form of security. And for section S, there's no security, but we have various or plenty conditions. Same with books and publications. Same requirement upon importation. Still the four, the DEI, but as mentioned for the SMT, for animals and books, we do not require the 100% surety for duties and taxes. For Annex B6, travelers' personal effects and goods imported for sports purposes, the similar provision or counterpart is Section 800H for personal and household effects. There is also a requirement of 100% form of security. And then the TEI, the misdeclaration, import DL or airway bill of the invoice or packing list. For Annex B, tourist publicity material, we do not have that similar provision. Also with Annex B8, goods imported as frontier traffic. For Annex B9, goods imported for humanitarian purposes. This is Section M of Section 800. There's no security but subject to certain conditions. And Section 120 and 121 of the CNPA for the tax and duty-free importation or of relief consignments. And we have, this is covered under Joint Administrative Order number 1/2020. For Annex C, means of transport, which is covered by a CPD carnet, we have Section 800F on vehicles of returning residents. And there is also a security of 100% of the certain duties and taxes. For Annex D, animals, this is Section I on the importation of domestic animals of returning residents. Section J on the importation of goods for exhibition. Section 800S on animals for scientific, experimental, propagation, or breeding, and for other botanical, zoological, and national defense purpose. Except for Section 800S, we require 100% of the certain duties and taxes, and the same requirement, documents requirement, except for Section 800S, as we do not require surety or security. For Annex E, goods imported with partial relief from import duties and taxes, we do not have any counterpart or similar provisions under the CNPA. This is, there are goods that are not covered under this Istanbul Convention, perishable goods or consumable items, and goods for processing or repair. For the salient features...
Collector Kawili, excuse me, Collector.
Yes, sir.
Balikan ko po kayo. Can we cut your presentation because ASEC Bailen is here and he has a meeting with the secretary, no? Secretary Locsin. He is here now so that he can answer the question of Senator Tolentino. So, Collector Kawili, balikan kita.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sa salient features na tayo. Senator Tolentino, ASEC Bailen is here to answer your question. Can you state your question now, sir?
Yes, this is also related to what the lady from, I think, the Bureau of Customs and the topic we have at hand, Convention on Temporary Admission. My earlier question, Mr. Chairman, was focused on the idea of again having the Department of Finance, the Bureau of Customs, and even the Department of Foreign Affairs being creative enough in utilizing this, if ever this is ratified, Convention on Temporary Admission, as we address COVID-19. The next issue after the vaccines, and which I have been stating this several months ago, sirang plaka na, is the matter of freezers, refrigeration, cold chain technology. Ang tanong ko po, ito po yung para sa Bureau of Customs, DTI, if DTI is present, will the convention allow the entry of refrigeration equipment for a limited period, tax-free, just to store our vaccines and thereafter re-export it again? But that's a question which should be answered by the Bureau of Customs, because we're still in the Annex D portion before the good chairman stopped the BOC to have my question addressed to the Department of Foreign Affairs. The same question: will Taiwan be allowed, or Taiwanese be allowed, Taiwan manufacturers, Taiwan corporations be allowed to bring into the country, under this Convention on Temporary Admission, CTA, refrigeration equipment for a period of 6 months, even if Taiwan is not a party to this convention, because Taiwan is very near. And I am invoking this because I will be asking this question tomorrow, Mr. Chairman, and I can be telegraphed on this, because it appears DFA is listening, and DFA will always confirm that we have a one China policy, although we have a MECO office in Taipei. It appears that even the Interagency Task Force, IATF, for that matter, relative to COVID-19, I have a copy in my possession. The IATF, as early as May 22, 2020, last year, during the height of the pandemic, during the height of the lockdown, issued a resolution 39, which states that one of the collaborating organizations would be a Tpnw corporation from Taiwan, a vaccine manufacturer. So if that, and now they're on the verge of having the first Taiwanese vaccine, we have entered into a collaboration through this IATF resolution. And the partner is a silent resource person there, the OST. They cannot invoke confidentiality agreement anymore. I have the IATF. With this, can Taiwan now utilize, or a Taiwan corporation utilize this Convention on Temporary Agreement, bringing in freezers here, refrigeration equipment, aside from the vaccine? Me personally, because of the proximity of Taipei, Taiwan, Taichung, it is nearer to ship vaccines from Taipei than from the other countries. That this corporation I have researched is based on Taichung, backed up by the National Taiwan University and the Japanese government. So will they be allowed under this new convention? And DFA, my final question before you leave: how will this affect our one China policy? Is it exempt? Because we're dealing with a global pandemic. We're not just dealing with your normal diplomatic relations. This is a global pandemic. We're seeking the cure. We're seeking the vaccine. We're seeking the refrigeration, which can be answered by this new convention. How do you answer that, sir? My final question. Bago ka umalis.
Okay, Asek Bailen, please. Nakamute ka, sir. Nakamute ka. Asek, nakamute ka. Okay, go ahead. Na-double click mo, sir. Nakamute ka ulit. Asek, nakamute ka ulit. Just one click. One click. Okay.
Just one click.
Okay.
All right. I apologize, sir. I was on mute earlier when I should have been silent, and now I have a hard time. But to answer the question, the very legitimate question of the Honorable Senator Tolentino directly, well, we have the one China policy, and even as we are discussing, it's the one China policy is of course being discussed again in terms of U.S.-China relations in the last few days of Senator Donald Trump. But with respect to the Philippines, we have the one China policy since we...
Asek, if I could
Yes, sir.
correct you, that's not President Trump. Secretary Pompeo agreed to proceed with the normalization of ties with Taiwan. Probably
Thank you,
that's
sir.
what you're citing.
Thanks for correcting me, sir. So for the One China policy that the Philippines has adhered to ever since opening diplomatic relations with Beijing in 1976, and perhaps my colleagues in the Asia Pacific office here in DF will correct me later in case I am wrong. But to my mind, that refers to policy, political relationship. In China, we have the One China policy between the Philippines and China as the same bilateral relationship between China and other bilateral parties, including the US. But China also has what you will know as one country, two systems with respect to Macau, with respect to Hong Kong, while they do not have the same political governance structure, economic structure as the rest of the mainland. They are part of one China, even if they have a different economic system. With respect to this particular convention that you asked, Taiwan also is a member economy, for example, of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. And China is also a member of those organizations where the stress is not on political relationships but on economic relationships such as APEC. So the One China policy will not prevent the Philippines from having an economic relationship with Taipei as we do now through MECO in Taipei or through TECO here in Manila. And the One China policy will not be a bar to pursuing that economic relationship with Taipei, with Taiwan, which the One China policy allows. More so now in this age of the pandemic, where we need help with other countries, not just China in terms of the Sinovac vaccine, but also in terms of our obtaining vaccine from Taiwan. And some of the members here, I think Asekale Buendia from the OST, they're also part of the work with the vaccine czar, Secretary Carlito Galvez. I think will confirm that that should not be a problem. The One China pursue. So through the chair, thank you so much.
Asek, can you repeat your yung last few sentences mo because you got cut off or I got cut off?
Yes, yes, sir.
What did you say sa last few sentences?
In my legal opinion, as legal advisor of DFA, the One China policy is not a bar to pursuing an economic relationship with Taiwan, as we in fact enjoy with Taiwan as an economic unit, and more so now as we pursue our pandemic response, possibly to get a vaccine from Taiwan, and perhaps the other members of the IATF, I think Asekle Buendia is here, will affirm that.
Senator Tolentino?
Just one last point. The good ASEC failed to answer. Will this Convention on Temporary Admission be applicable to Taiwanese corporations, Taiwan residents, or even the Taiwanese government when they export COVID-related materials, medical devices to the Philippines, including freezers? Will this apply even if they're not a signatory to this? Because they're not recognized as a member of the United Nations, I suppose.
Through the chairman, yes, Your Honor. Taiwan is not currently a member of the Istanbul Convention, but I understand it has some bilateral engagements on ATA with other countries. So this particular convention would not be applicable to Taiwan, but I think we would eventually, as soon as possible, I think, be able to find creative legal solutions to support the proposal that you have, and that is to ingress products, refrigerators from Taiwan, and even vaccines, so that we would be able to address our national response to the pandemic. So with or without this particular ATA convention, I think your proposal can be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we
I
can
just hope the good ASEC will attend the hearing tomorrow. Kasi yung nandun, I'm sorry, hindi niya nasasagot na Mr. Chairman.
Are you referring to ASEC Bailen? You want ASEC Bailen tomorrow?
Sana po kasi sa Committee of the Whole hearing for the COVID-19 preparations, there is a, with all due respect, there is a DFA representative which would always invoke the confidentiality agreement.
So ASEC Bailen has been summoned to attend the hearing tomorrow. Just ask the permission of the secretary, sir. Okay na yan. Ask the permission.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will confirm that, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so you can leave us, ASEC. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
I'll convey your regards to Secretary Locsin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll see him now.
Okay, can we continue now with the presentation of Collector Kawili of the Customs? Nasa salient features po tayo. Next stop. Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the salient provision, features of the Atacarne, this will serve as the entry declaration or the goods declaration because it is a single document of goods that will pass through several customs administrations. This will be used both as import and export document. There is a 1-year validity from date of issuance. Duties and taxes due or guaranteed. Articles listed on an Atacarne can be imported to and exported from any of the member countries as needed during the 1-year life of the carne. It eliminates temporary import bans. So long as the goods are exported within the allotted time frame, no duties and taxes are due. And failure to export all goods listed on the carne results in the need to pay the applicable duties and taxes. For the next slide, the benefits of Atacarne. There's no need to lodge regular customs goods declaration. No need to post a cash bond or other security for the goods upon arrival because of the guarantee issued by the National Issuing Guarantee Association appointed by the Bureau of Customs. And there's no need to go to Department of Finance to secure the TPI. No need to submit voluminous documents to customs. More competitive, especially during the post-pandemic period. At par with other signatories to the convention, faster flow of product innovations, and sign of mature business climate. For the benefits to customs, there will be less paperwork, less hassle and optimized assignment of personnel, faster processing and release of the goods, reduces administrative expenses, no loss of revenue, make customs with trade facility, eliminates recurrence of complaints from foreign travelers for rejecting other goods. For the next few slides, slide number 23 to 27, show the list of the 94 countries that are signatories to any of the two conventions, the Atta Convention and Istanbul Convention. Please, next slide. I will not go through it because there are 94. So we will just show you. But Philippines is not listed here. Next. Next. So this slide will show you the list of signatories from Asian and selected major economies. For the Asian, we have Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And only Thailand, signatory to both convention, for the Atta Convention and Istanbul Convention. Other major economies, Australia, Canada, China, European Union, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, and the US. Although Vietnam is just new, the ratification was in 2019. And for these slides, there are 10 annexes, and all of these 13 annexes were entered into force. Next slide. This is just a list of the contracting parties that agreed to the 13 annexes. Next slide. For the next few slides are the reservations proposed by the DOF to the annexes in the Istanbul Convention. For Annex A, there is no reservation, but for Annex B, there are reservations proposed by DOF on Annex B1 to B9 on the limit, the exemption to VAT only, to the VAT to those provided in relation to Section 107 and Section 109 of the NIRC. Next. This one is for Annex B.5, B6, B7, and B9. If we can see, it's the exemption is under Section 109. We all it says here that we also reserve our rights to limit exemptions to the VAT only to those provided under Section 109 of the NRIC. Next slide. For Annex C, the reservation is also for Section 109 of the NIRC. Same with Annex D on animals, but it's still Section 109, but subsection B of the NIRC. Next. Here, the Philippines will invoke withdrawal mechanism under Article 29 of the Istanbul Convention. And Article 29 says that any contracting party which has entered reservations may withdraw them in whole or in part at any time by notification to the depositary, specifying the date on which such withdrawal takes effect. Annexes were the DOF recommended not to exceed is Annex B, Point 8, and Annex E. The reason is that the Philippines is an archipelagic state. As such, importations between frontier zones are not applicable. And for Annex E, national legislations does not provide for partial relief from import duties and taxes. So that's all, Your Honors. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Collector, for the presentation. Does that end the customs presentation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so about the DFA, is there any presentation from the DFA? Okay lang kung wala. Basta, I'm just asking. Meron? Wala? COMSEC? Wala? DFA? Okay.
Wala na po sila,
Okay,
sir.
sige. Okay, we now go to the DTI. We have 3 agencies here under the DTI mentioned: the Export Development Council, the Center for International Trade Expositions and Missions, and the Bureau of International Trade Relations. So, one presentation from each agency or one from the DTI? See, who will make the presentation, sir? Ma'am? DTI?
Nawawala.
COMSEC?
Ma'am Pauline Juan, are you still there? Mukhang nawala sila, sir. Siguro we should proceed, sir, with the other
Okay,
agencies.
yes. We have the Department of Justice, State Council De Jesus. Is this the list?
Yes, sir.
Okay. State Council Paulito De Jesus, are you still with us?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, our position paper is still under review and we will submit it once it's signed by our concerned official. Thank you.
Okay, can we request that you expedite the review of the said position paper and its submission, sir?
Yes, sir. We will.
Kasi ang pagkakaintindi ko, this has been pending with with our country for 30 years yata. So we can wait for another 30 hours, pero not 30 years.
Yes, sir. We will communicate, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Can we now hear from the private sector, PhilExport, and other business personalities present who wants to make a presentation?
Your Honor.
Chua, Mr. Ortiz, sino po?
Okay, sure.
Sige, go ahead.
Not a
Sino po?
presentation, Your Honor, but just some statements.
Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis, yes, sir.
For the last almost 4 decades, we have been awaiting for the ATA Carnet. When the Export Development Law was passed in 1984, it was one of the decisions that was made as to be exporting a serious exporting country, we must be able to join the convention and have the ATA Carnet, because we are at a disadvantage when it comes to international shows. Also, there are a lot of importations, a lot of repairs. And for our information of Mr. Francis Tolentino, Senator Francis Tolentino, 15-20 years ago, the first testing that we had with ATA was with Taiwan. We had an experiment with them together with the Bureau of Customs. We tested them for 2 years, and it was very successful. But unfortunately, as mentioned earlier, they were not a member of the convention, so we had to go to the convention members. And after that, all the efforts in the Export Development Council, we have with us Ambassador Francis Chua, who also represents the International Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, and a member of the International Trade, who is the one that is really doing this now. And we're hoping that, and I think we have arrangement already with the Bureau of Customs and Department, that there will be an appointment of NIGA, the national implementing body here, will be Philippine Chamber of Commerce. And maybe Dr. Francis Chu can say something about that.
Okay, thank you, Serge.
Yes, Mr. Francis
Chairman.
Chua. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Today I'm here as a representative of International Chamber of Commerce. First, let me try to answer the issue of whether Taiwan goods would enter the Philippines under the ACA Carnet system. My answer is categorically yes. We created ACA Carnet by International Chamber for trade facilitation. Any country, any territory that is a part of this ACA Carnet system is allowed to have free flow of goods. This ACA Carnet could be best defined just like the APEC travel card. All the businessmen who travel throughout the APEC country, most of them all carry a APEC business card. With this card, we could go to all those countries under APEC without securing any visa. The same thing under ACA Carnet, whether you are Taiwan or you are any other country, as far as you are part of ACA Carnet, you would export your product to any country for a short period of 1 year. The issue here is not whether you pay tax or not. The tax definitely will be paid, because if you don't bring out the goods within 1 year, there is a system, a guarantee system that we, ICC, together with, in the case of Philippines, PCCI, and the exporting country, assuming it's exporting country, assuming it's Japan, we will have to guarantee the custom in the Philippine government. If these items fail to leave the Philippines, the tax will be paid in accordance with the duties of the Philippine government. So this is the assurance we give to the government, and at the same time, we also assure the honorables that Taiwan is recognized and they are not banned from entering the Philippines, because on the other carnet, this is trade facilitation. This has nothing to do with politics. I hope that International Chamber could make this very clear. We are here for business. We are not here for any political argument. So I hope Your Honor could help everybody who is under attack carnet to follow this universal system. Salamat po.
Salamat po, Ambassador Francis Chua. Thank you, Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis, for the inputs. So, who's next? Comsec? Department of Finance?
Sir, the DOF po will make a manifestation. Thank you.
Okay. Who in the DOF, please?
Good afternoon, Honorable Senator Pimentel. My name is Assistant Secretary Dakila Napao of the Revenue Operations Group. Good afternoon also to Honorable Senator Francis Tolentino and to Honorable Senator Amy Marcos, and to all the resource persons online. The DOF would like to make a manifestation regarding the reservations that the DOF made on the 8A Carney Convention. The DOF would like to request for opportunity to submit a revised reservation to the annexes to the 8A Carney. As you know, Mr. Chair, during our briefing last December 9, you raised the issue that we revisit the reservations, for especially particularly since we made reservations as to 12 of the 13 annexes. So we did the revisiting and the examination of the reservations, as well as compared and evaluated as to how the other countries have made the reservations to the 8A Carney. And we have determined, Your Honors, that additional reservations may have to be made in terms of particular procedures in each section of the annexes, as well as reservation as to particular items or goods in each of the annexes. Your Honors, this will also give us the opportunity to revisit the blanket reservation that we made in terms of the VAT exemption, Your Honors. So with this manifestation, we would like to request that the DOF would be given the opportunity to resubmit reservations, Your Honor. Thank you.
Just to clarify, ASEC.
Yes, Your Honor.
The reservations have been submitted to the ano bang tawag mo dyan? The Secretariat of the Convention. Are we withdrawing our previously submitted reservation? Is that the plan?
Your Honors, fortunately, the reservations have not yet been submitted to the Secretariat, Your Honor.
Okay. But now,
so we still have this opportunity.
Yes, but now that the Senate is already considering the convention, di ba? Kasi we're conducting this hearing.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you already involve us as part of the foreign relations participation of the Senate? Since we're already hearing this convention anyway, can you furnish the committee with the new or the amended reservations that you intend to submit, even before actually submitting them. Involve this committee kasi involved na tayo eh. We are now hearing it eh. Pwede ba yun?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can we request that of the DDR? And then Secretary Tolentino first muna. Yes, Secretary Tolentino.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to know what would be the effect of the proposed reservations coming from the Department of Finance. Will this delay the ratification of this treaty? Will this open up again future reservations coming from other concerned agencies or even the DFA? Or will this delay practically our entrance to the Istanbul Convention? Again, for the last 30 years, the various chambers have been waiting for this. How will this affect in the long run, in the long term, our post-pandemic plans? If we are still, if we will wait for the DOF reservations, I'm just concerned, Mr. Chairman, that this might prevent us from taking opportunities post-pandemic wise of other resources, perhaps in the manufacturing, in the other sectors that would probably open up big time, so to speak, after the pandemic. So how long will they, with all due respect to DOF, how long will they expect to finish their reservations to be submitted? Thank you, Mr.
Your Honor, Mr. Chair, admittedly, this will delay a bit the ratification of the convention simply because we will be resubmitting the same to the Office of the President. But considering that only DOF will be making a revision to the reservation, the usual rounds of getting the concurrence of the other agencies will not anymore, to my mind, be made, such that it will be the DOF who is the sole agency that made previous reservation to this ETA Carne, will be making the memo to the President via the Department of Foreign Affairs, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, again, I raised my earlier question posited perhaps 2 hours ago to the concerned agencies. Will this convention allow us to accept the entry of freezers, refrigeration equipment that we will be utilizing in the inoculation of millions of Filipinos for purposes of COVID-19 vaccinations? If they will enter here, be allowed to enter here for 6 months, again, 2 dosages will be allowed, period in between of 21 days. So that would suffice. But with the delay, will this affect also if it is connected with the vaccination program of this is to stretch of the vaccination program to government? Because any delay in all these holistic approaches that we are trying to craft will affect definitely not just a person that is supposed to be vaccinated, but the entire economy, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, based on our, just an initial evaluation, Annex B3 could be used for this purpose, Your Honor, in this convention. But the BOC may have a position also on this, but could be Annex B3, Your Honors.
Annex B3 covered by section number, ganun yan eh. Ganun yung presentation, hindi ko lang na-memorize. Section number what of the Customs and Tariff, Customs Modernization and Tariff Act.
Your Honors, may I ask that Director Amy Macabalis be recognized of our Revenue Office, Your Honor, to further explain, Your Honor.
Yes, Director Macabalis.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, there's a specific provision in Annex B3 describing containers as allowed for temporary entry. So if we are envisioning the refrigerated containers as the containers of the vaccines, then they may be allowed temporary entry under the Atacarne provision. This is, of course, condition that the refrigerators will eventually be exited from the Philippines.
We are citing the treaty, which we have not yet ratified and concurred in. Akala ko there's some of the provisions of the treaty have been adopted in domestic law through the tariff code.
Okay, Your Honor, Section 800N of the TMTA unfortunately only covered packaging, and the containers there are limited to also packaging materials, but the provision for the Atacarne Convention is wider. So it will possibly allow for the refrigerated containers. However, but the local provision that we have is more limited.
If I understood Senator Tolentino correctly, I think he wants to address the present need na to allow the temporary admission into Philippine customs territory of refrigeration equipment or freezers, no, for use of the vaccine. Okay,
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Oo nga,
Because most of the, with due respect, most of the vaccine manufacturers would have their own freezer equipment and cold chain equipment. So they can be shipped here temporarily, and after the vaccination, they can be shipped out again because we don't have any need for those items. So that's the purpose of my line of questioning. And then again, Mr. Chairman, if the Department of Finance will craft another set of reservations that might delay all of this. So all bolts and nuts, if pieced together, would help in their own little ways, Mr. Chairman. Yun lang po yung point ko, Mr. Chairman.
I think the scenario that you have painted is covered by the subject matter of the treaty kasi nga temporary admission, di ba? Yun eh. But now how can we use the treaty if we have not yet ratified and concurred in it? So I'm asking, that's why I'm asking DOF or the customs people who are experts in our customs code, if there is existing provision of law which we can use to address the concern of Senator Tolentino.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, please. From the Bureau of Customs, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Identify yourself, sir.
Yes, I Deputy Commissioner Edward Dibuco, Mr. Chairman, from the Bureau of Customs. So presently, Mr. Chairman, to address the question of the Honorable Francis Tolentino, we have this present law under the CMTA, Mr. Chairman, under Section 120. The process is called relief consignment, wherein goods such as food, medicine, equipment, and materials may be allowed entry under simplified customs procedure. So our implementing regulations has already been issued for this purpose, Mr. Chairman, and entry of, for example, freezers and refrigerated containers for purposes of storing the vaccines may be processed under this system, Mr. Chairman. The process of relief consignment.
The process, pero yung benefits din ba, nandun din ba? Yung ano ba, total temporary exemption from payment of duties and taxes. I think ayun yung benefit dun sa treaty. Can that be extended to the entry of the freezers in the scenario illustrated by Senator Tolentino?
Yes. Well, under that very system, Your Honor, it's not provided, Your Honor, the
According to Ambassador Francis Chua, we are already a member of the Ata Carne system. So you must be able to find siguro a legal basis to address the concern of Senator Tolentino.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, yes, Your Honor, under Section 1.1, the duty and tax treatment for a relief consignment imported during a state of calamity. So we are in a state of calamity and intended for a specific calamity for the use of the calamity victims, there shall be exempt from duties and taxes, Your Honor. So it's provided under the CMTA, Your Honor.
Oh, Senator Tolentino, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, is the provision on relief exemption applicable only to consumable items? And I'm referring to food items, medicines, clothing, but not your medical, your freezers equipment, which you will have to re-export again, ship out again out of the jurisdiction of the Philippines. So the Section 121 relief consignment probably would deal with items that will have to be donated and consumed and not shipped out again outside of the country.
Well, Your Honor, under Section 120, it also includes equipment, medicine, and materials for shelter. So it includes equipment, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Chair, but it does not mention that the equipment will be shipped out again, will be exported again, Mr. Chairman. And that's the purpose of the Istanbul Convention.
Yes, Your Honor.
Magkaiba tayo. Pero if the Bureau of Customs can find a way, kasi yung housing, hindi naman, pag ginawa yung bahay, hindi naman iaalis na ng Pilipinas yun. So if you can find a way, that would also help us, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, may I say something?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
When we experimented with Taiwan, the driving force at that time was mostly because at that time we were importing a lot of equipment from Taiwan, and one of the things that we would like to be exempted is yung repair and samples. This is covered by ATA. So the question of freezers, which can take a long time, will just be a question of exempting it from the 1-year rule, and until it's over and be shifted. So it can be like repair or like the temporary, or if this is not covered by the guarantee after the 1-year rule, it can be a duty drawback. Maybe the importation can somebody can also put up the duty to be paid also, and it can be a duty drawback. If I remember correctly, the reservation of finance, we're discussing it whether we should be resolved first before we said maybe we can take the reservation of the Department of Finance mainly are on VAT, on the ability to be able to put VAT. I don't think it will affect what we're talking about. It's just a reservation that they would like to be able to apply VAT, because these are not VATable anyway, because they will be shipped out. So so it should not be affected.
We welcome back Senator Amy Marcos. You want to participate in the discussion, ma'am?
No, I'm just listening. I said my piece. I'm now listening to the private sector like you are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is how I understand the situation to be. With the manifestation of ASEC Napao, my understanding is that the executive branch is going to withdraw the communication of the ratification of the treaty. Tama po ba yan? Because you still have steps to do within the executive branch. So is what is going to happen, ASEC?
In effect, Your Honor, it's correct. We will submit to the Office of the President the revised reservation, Your Honor.
Oh, nga. So meaning to say that from the point of view of the executive, you have not yet ratified the said convention. Okay, so please communicate with the Senate and with this committee, because the last communication is that ratified na po. So let's just follow the formalities that we require. And then that's a problem now. This will actually further delay the ratification plus concurrence. So ang appeal na lang siguro namin, given the manifestation of the PhilExport and the business people here and the support of the customs, is let's expedite. A few months delay, ganun siguro. Not a few years. Not a few years kasi magre-retire na
yes,
po
sir.
ako noon.
Yes, Your Honor, we will give this our preferential attention, Your Honor. We will immediately act on this, Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Tolentino, yes sir, yes
that's
sir.
why I'm really worried about the delay. Kasi sabi nyo nga, this has been on the table for the last 3 decades. And then we are on a pandemic, on the verge of accepting vaccines without freezers. And the Istanbul Convention is part of that pathway where we can have freezers without purchasing it, re-exporting it for a definite period of time. So it might, God forbid, it might affect even our vaccination program in the long run. So if we can request the DOF to, because February will be the start of the vaccine rollout, if we can request the DOF to perhaps not just give this a priority, but even perhaps withdraw their plan to have another round of reservations, because it will affect everything. Believe you me. Kung wala pong freezer, paano na yun? Saan natin lalagay? Nabalitaan niyo yun sa New York kahapon, tinapon na lang yung Moderna. Kasi pag binuksan yon, kailangan i-consume na lahat. O hindi na po pwedeng ibalik sa freezer. But before you can vaccinate, there has to be a freezer. I'm just saying this in a light manner, but I foresee some problems ahead if we don't have the necessary customs procedure, the necessary legal framework to allow the entry of freezers and other cold chain equipment that will enable us, the Department of Health, to store vaccines. Ito na nga siguro yung mga kadagdag, tapos i-delay nyo pa, parang self-inflicted wounds lahat ito, kasalanan na rin natin. Yun lamang po, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Ortiz Luis, yes.
I'm just confused because the President has already signed it. It is brought to the Senate, not for ratification, it is for concurrence. So why are we holding it back? So whatever reservation that's between the executive department and as far as we are concerned, the President is just waiting for the concurrence of the Senate, not for ratification. It's already signed by the President. So why are we changing what was signed by the President?
We have DFA presence here. Can we get your opinion on this matter, DFA? There is now a treaty ratified by the President, communicated to the Senate, asking for concurrence, and yet the executive branch intends to make a reservation on the treaty, the terms of which have not yet been finalized. So, kasi they have a draft, but they want to change the draft. So now, is it advisable or even proper for the Senate to continue with concurrence to the said convention? The details of which, kasi part ng details yun eh, the details of which are not fixed yet. So, can we have the DFA to guide us here?
Good afternoon, Senator Pimentel. My name is Attorney Melissa Talan from the DFA Office of Treaties and Legal Affairs.
Attorney Talan.
Yes, Senator. That's correct, sir. So the convention has been ratified by the President, and based on jurisprudence, the Senate could only consent or give its concurrence or withhold its concurrence. For this, but the DOF as the lead agency has determined that perhaps it would be beneficial beneficial for the country to revisit some of the reservations. Some of the senators earlier, in particular Senator Marcos, noted that 12 out of 13 annexes have been reserved. So it may be ineffective, and in a way it is good. But however, since the president has already ratified this, then what we could do procedurally would be to consult with the executive, with the president, because under the constitution, the president is the one mandated to ratify. As the lead agency, however, they may be the most knowledgeable regarding which reservations should the Philippines, reserve, or which reservations should the Philippines give, so that it would really be beneficial. The accession to this convention would really benefit the country.
Okay, tama naman yun. Understanding ko, we are after the best interest of the country. There is no concept of touch move here. If the executive branch wants more time to review, wants to reconsideration in effect, wants to withdraw something, I think we should allow it. Senator Tolentino, what can you say, sir?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think the committee has now the right to send this treaty to the plenary, considering that the chief executive, the DF is a branch of the executive, has already ratified. So if there is a planned withdrawal, the Senate, through the Senate committee, should receive a notification from the executive branch, from the chief executive, the office of the executive secretary, notifying the committee that because of some proposed reservations or withdrawals thereto, there is now a need to unratify, so to speak, the treaty. But as a member of the committee, I have yet, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, I have yet to hear a communication coming from Malacanang, Mr. Chairman.
That is correct. That is correct. So, since we are all eager to be a party to this convention, we will just continue. We will just, we will draft anyway. We need to draft the committee report. That takes time. So that should give sufficient time now to the executive branch to formally communicate with this committee. Okay, but ako, as the committee chair, for me, it's not unusual or not alarming. These things happen, no? That if the executive branch needs to revisit the terms of a treaty, it has ratified, then we should allow it. Yes, Mr. Luis, Sergio Ortiz Luis.
When we were discussing it, we were concerned about the reservation, but we decided that why don't the Senate just give its concurrence? Parang IRR, palitan nila yung IRR kung gusto nila, but we concur anyway. Hindi material, VAT lang yung sinasabi nila, that they should be able to impose VAT on certain things. So why don't we just agree and concur in sa Senado and pass it on and have it completed, so we can move our things. And if they want to change some of the things, like the other can do the IRR, that they can just change some of the details. But lang naman yun eh. Why don't we just concur and allow them to do the changes that they want to do on that, so that hindi naman tayo ma-delay. It's not worth debating on that bad thing. Para sa amin, it's not that important. They just want a safety net na hindi maabuso. After all, ito naman ay talaga namang VAT-free, tax-free, duty-free ito eh. So they're looking at instances where they might be battable. So let them find it out. But as far as we're concerned, why don't the Senate just concur and let it go?
Okay, thank you, sir, for your advice and for your input. So, okay, we will, as chairman, I will give time for the executive branch to communicate with the committee. But at least we have heard it, and there is no objection. Actually, there is eagerness for the country to be part of this convention. from the private sector up to the customs and the other agencies of government. So, yun, and then we will just follow the normal course. We will draft a committee report. In due time, submit it unless we receive communication from the executive branch that they want us to that they want us to anong tawag mo doon? They want us not to proceed with the formal concurrence because they have still to do some steps within the executive branch. Is that acceptable, Senator Tolentino? Okay, Senator Marcos, ma'am, is that okay? So we proceed normally as a committee, but we have heard the manifestation of the DOF. Okay, so all I need as chairman is a formal communication from the executive branch that there has been a change of mind. Of course, so we are after the best interest of the country. We have to work together. Tsaka you are the executive branch is the chief architect of our foreign policy and foreign relations. Okay, so any other comments or discussion? Yung customs na lang, no? One last appeal to address the concern of Senator Tolentino. There must be a way. Even without this treaty, siguro under existing law, kaya yun. Okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, Your Honor.
Customs, yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'd like to
Senator Marcos.
I'd like to echo the sentiments of my chairman regarding customs kasi syempre laging kinatatakutan ng smuggling at baka pagkakataon na ito na mapabilis ang mahiwagang single window daan sa customs. Parang napakatagal na natin naririnig yan, di pa nagagawa. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ambassador Chua.
Sir Francis Chua, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, if you require the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris and in Singapore, they are on standby anytime. That if you wanted to be clarified more on the details of ATA Carnate, we are more than happy to be your resource person to provide you with all the answers.
Okay, sir. We will schedule a briefing na yan, briefing of the committee. So the COMSEC is requested to arrange the schedule for this briefing of the committee on the ATA Carnate Convention. Thank you, Ambassador Chua, for that offer.
You,
so if there are
Yes, sir.
no other matters, so the chair thanks all of you for your participation. And Senators Tolentino, Marcos for your attendance and also your participation. Senator Marcos, ikaw pala ang nagpabago ng isip nila.
Sorry, pagkulo ako, pero nagtatalaga ako 12 out of 13. Ayaw Bakit ratified?
Pero we're after the best interest of the country. If we need to step on the brakes, we will have to step on the brakes, di ba? Pag-aralan po natin ng mabuti. So, thank you so much everybody for your participation. We will just suspend we will just suspend our hearing on the
Suspend on the CPA, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Weekend.
Happy New Year!
Thank you.
Salamat!